Dallas, a city of USA, almost never sleeps. Some people here chase dreams, others just go with the flow. But whether you're a dreamer or a drifter, life in North Dallas can be anything but quiet. And that's where our story begins. A late-night adventure on one of Dallas's highways that turned into something far more sinister. It all started in November. I was living in Houston for college, and to unwind after long study sessions of the medical field, I'd hit the gym at odd hours around 2:30 a.m. Yes, I know it's a strange time for a workout, but in Dallas, there are some 24-hour gyms around. So it worked out perfectly for me. Plus, the roads are clear at that hour. No traffic, fully silent. Just me, my bike, and the open highway. I've always loved night rides. Nothing compares to the thrill of speeding through empty streets, the cold air, bruising against your face. But on one fateful night, something strange happened. It was one of those nights which I can't forget in my life, when I decided to explore a new route instead of my usual one. I veered off the highway and took a narrow road cutting through a secluded area near Beeman Hotel. It was dead silent. No other vehicles. Just me and the eerie hum of the wind. Suddenly, I felt something. It wasn't the usual cold on my arms. There was this heavy, unsettling presence. I've ridden through dark alleys and highways before, but this was different. I could feel it as if the air itself was pressing down on me. Feeling a bit uneasy, I sped up, but that's when it happened. A cold tap on my shoulder. I froze. Was that real? At 80 kilometers per hour? It couldn't have been possible, right? My brain was racing. But then it happened again. A second tap, followed by a sensation that the pillion seat behind me had become heavier. Something or someone was sitting behind me. I wanted to scream, but fear had paralyzed me. I kept telling myself, it's just your imagination. Just keep riding. Don't look back. Every instinct in me screamed not to stop. So instead of slowing down, I revved the eerie engine and shot forward like my life depended on it. Then came the deep voice. It was faint but clear. A gruff, mocking voice speaking in typical Dallas slang. Hey man, why are you running? My heart was pounding, and my mind couldn't process what was happening. Something, or someone, was definitely behind me, and it was taunting me. I knew I had two choices. Look back and face whatever was there, or ride faster than I ever had before. I chose the latter. The bike roared down the highway as I leaned into every curve, desperate to shake off whatever was clinging to me. In my panic, I thought, if I hit a speed bump, maybe whatever's sitting behind me will fall off. It was a reckless idea, but I didn't care. I could lose control of the bike on sharp turns, but fear had gripped me so tightly that nothing else mattered except getting home. The taps on my shoulder continued, and so did the voice, now laughing. Finally, I reached a familiar stretch near Lakewood. As soon as I did, the eerie weight vanished. The taps stopped. It was as if whatever had been with me had decided to leave. I pulled over and nearly threw up from the fear and adrenaline coursing through my body. I never told anyone about that night, not because I didn't want to, but because I knew no one would believe me. They'd laugh it off, call me crazy, or say it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But even now, retelling this story makes the hairs on my neck stand on end. I've never touched drugs in my life, and I know what I experienced was real. This wasn't some hallucination, it was something more. So here's my advice. If you ever find yourself on a lonely stretch of road, especially at night, and feel like you're not alone, listen to that instinct. Some things are better left unexplored. Fear is the mind's greatest catalyst. It can paralyze you, take control of your thoughts, and push your body to its limits. Have you ever experienced something so terrifying that it stuck with you long after it was over? If so, I'd love to hear your story. Send it to me at the email address below, and maybe, just maybe, your encounter will be featured in the next episode of this channel. Until next time, stay safe, enjoy your life, and remember, some roads are better left untraveled. Hello, my name is Mickey, and I'm from Kyoto, Japan. This incident happened with my friend Haru, who has been my best friend since childhood. Haru and I went to school together, from nursery through high school, and our moms were also great friends. We even lived near each other, so we would often stay over at each other's homes, sometimes for entire nights. This incident happened when we were in ninth grade. As usual, Haru had come to my house for a night stay. After studying for a bit, once everyone at my place was asleep, we decided to watch movies. While I loved watching horror movies, Haru was terrified of them. Still, because she was with me, Haru would watch horror films, even though she ended up scared afterward. She even had several deity posters in her room for comfort. That night, though, nothing strange happened, and we both fell asleep peacefully. But things took a turn in the coming days. My birthday was in September, and I invited a few friends over to celebrate. We enjoyed ourselves so much that we lost track of time. It got late, so I suggested my friends stay the night. After getting permission from their parents, everyone stayed over. Around 11 p.m., after the party was over, we decided to play Truth or Dare. There were 5 of us, and we all knew that Haru was quite afraid of ghosts in the dark. This made her continuously pick Truth because she feared what we might dare her to do. But when she kept picking Truth, we all insisted that she finally take a dare. Reluctantly, Haru agreed. There's a restaurant near my house that used to be an old cemetery, or so my grandmother had told me. She claimed to have heard strange noises from there. However, ever since it was turned into a restaurant, none of us had experienced anything paranormal around that place. For the dare, we told Haru to sneak out of the house, go to that restaurant, and say 3 times, "Ghost, come to me." Haru was extremely scared and tried to back out, but everyone teased her until she agreed. I assured her, saying, "I'll walk with you and stay right behind you." This calmed her down a bit, and she started walking ahead. The streets were eerily quiet, and there was no sound in the darkness. Haru was too scared to even use her phone for light. Soon I started feeling a strange sense of dread and was about to stop her when one of my friends held me back and reminded me that it was Haru's dare to complete alone. Despite wanting to follow, I couldn't. She went ahead alone while we waited by my house, anxiously hoping she'd return safely. A while later, Haru finally came back, and I rushed to her, explaining that our friends had stopped me from going with her. But Haru didn't respond to anything I said. She just stood there, her head down. When I asked her if she was okay, I saw tears in her eyes. She looked at me once, but then quietly went inside. I thought maybe she was angry with me for leaving her alone, so I followed her to apologize. But by the time I reached the room, she was already asleep. I found it strange that she fell asleep so quickly, but I decided to talk to her in the morning. The next day, Haru was gone when I woke up. My mom told me she had left early without saying much, which was unusual. Since it was Saturday and we had no school, I decided to give her some space, thinking I'd talk to her at school the next day. But when I got to school, she wasn't there. Concerned, I went to her house that evening and found out from her mom that she was unwell, which is why she hadn't come to school. Strangely, each time I visited her house over the next few days, she'd be asleep. One day, unable to bear the suspense, I woke her up. She looked pale with dark circles under her eyes, and she seemed extremely weak. Seeing her like that, I felt terrible, somehow blaming myself for what happened. Her mom noticed my worry and suggested I leave, saying she'd call me once Haru felt better. As I left, Haru's troubled face stayed in my mind, and I regretted daring her to go out that night. After a few days, Haru called me and asked me to come over. I was relieved and rushed to her place. When I arrived, she was eating dinner, which included food she usually hated. I teased her. "Haru, you've changed so much since getting sick, even eating foods you used to avoid." Haru froze mid-bite, then looked at me with a strange smile that sent chills down my spine. She said, "I have changed, haven't I?" and left the table. That smile stayed with me. It felt off somehow. That night I stayed at her house. In her room, Haru turned on a horror movie and started watching it with an eerie enjoyment, as if she were watching a comedy. Her behavior was so unsettling that I tried to ignore it, telling her I was tired and wanted to sleep. She laughed louder and louder as the movie went on, making it difficult for me to relax. The next day, Haru attended school but was acting even stranger. During assembly, she suddenly fainted and had to be taken to the staff room. After resting a bit, she came back to class, but her expressions were off. Her eyes looked red, and her gaze was fierce. Just as she re-entered the classroom, she slapped a boy without warning. It turned out that this boy had joked she was faking to avoid assembly. The weirdest part was that Haru repeated his words exactly, word for word, even though he had said them quietly to me after she had fainted. Haru's condition kept deteriorating, so her parents finally sought help from their spiritual guru. The guru arrived and observed her for a while before explaining that a spirit had attached itself to Haru after the night of the dare. Since Haru was close to me, the spirit also seemed to recognize me, which was why Haru had called me for help that day. I felt guilty, but the guru assured me it wasn't my fault. After a couple of days of rituals, Haru gradually returned to normal, although she remained weak for a long time. Now, a few years later, Haru has fully recovered and lives her best life in Australia. This experience taught me to be more careful with dares, especially ones that could have unexpected consequences. I am from Maplewood. Although Maplewood has a rough reputation, the area where my family lives and where I grew up is in a safe, residential locality. We live in a 3-story apartment building with 4 flats on each floor. There are 12 families here, and we're all quite close, like one big happy family. Just like in the show Little House. I was just like any other 10-year-old, going to school, then tuitions from 4 to 5 p.m., and around 6 p.m., the kids from our society would go to the terrace and play games like ice pie or hide and seek. Sometimes we'd lose track of time while playing, and it would get pretty late, like around 8 p.m. when it was almost dark. One normal evening, my friend Jake rang my doorbell and asked my mom if I could come up to play on the terrace. I thought it was a bit odd since it was already 7:30 and it was starting to get dark. So I called out from inside, "How much will you play now?" But he replied, "Everyone is on the terrace waiting for you. Come, we'll play hide and seek." Honestly, I didn't enjoy hide and seek that much because I was terrible at it and always ended up being the seeker. The terrace of our building is quite large, and actually we have 2 terraces connected by a corridor with doors at both ends, making it a great spot for hide and seek. There were big water tanks placed around the terrace, providing plenty of hiding spots, and my friends took the game very seriously, even switching jackets or slippers sometimes to confuse the seeker. That evening, 6 of us were on the terrace. One of them was Jake's younger sister, Lily. She was 3 years younger than me and the youngest in our group. Her nickname at home was Baby, which she hated, so we all teasingly called her that. When I reached the terrace, my friend Sam had already started counting, since he was the seeker, and we all scrambled to find our hiding spots. I hid behind 2 water tanks with a narrow gap between them, around 2 or 3 centimeters. It was a good hiding spot for me. Peeking out, I saw that Lily was hiding behind another tank not far from me. If Sam came that way, he would spot her first, and then it would be my turn. I waved to her, signaling her to go hide somewhere else, but she didn't respond. She just sat there facing me, with no expression on her face. I whispered, "Baby, go hide somewhere else. Sam will see you here." But she didn't move or respond at all. It was almost dark, so I couldn't clearly see her face. But I knew she was staring in my direction. I was growing more impatient, feeling uneasy. And then, something really eerie happened. Lily started swinging back and forth. Her neck made a cracking sound as it tilted, and she smiled at me in a way that was unsettling. She kept staring blankly at me with her eyes, which seemed to be getting bigger. Her eyebrows were raised, and her eyes grew so big that I could almost make out the shape of her eyeballs, staring right at me through the darkness. I froze, feeling intense fear. Sam's voice snapped me back to my senses, and I ran out of the corridor screaming and crying. Everyone came out of their hiding spots, confused, and tried to comfort me. When I looked back, Jake was there with Lily, coming from the other side of the terrace. I couldn't believe what I had just seen. When I asked Jake if Baby had been with him the whole time, he said they were hiding together on the other terrace. Hearing that, I started crying out of fear, and my friends called my mom, who came and took me home. I fell sick with a high fever and a stomach infection, and I couldn't eat anything because every time I tried, I would just vomit. I didn't tell my parents what had happened, and luckily 2 days later, it was my brother's birthday. We held a religious ceremony at home. I insisted on sitting in the prayer, and I silently prayed for help, thanking God afterward. The very next day, my fever was gone, and I soon returned to normal. I never shared this incident with anyone, And whenever I get similar nightmares or sleep paralysis now, I recite Lord Krishna's name or chant Om Namo Narayana, which I truly believe helped me through that dark energy. Today, as a 23-year-old, I am a devotee of Lord Vishnu and dedicate 15 minutes daily to meditation and prayer. This practice gives me strength to face anything. I believe performing prayers in a new house can help cleanse any negative energies lingering in a place where we don't know what may have occurred before. Unfortunately, in Emily's story, her family wasn't aware of the history of their new home, which led to a costly mistake. Hope you guys enjoyed this story.